Hi, we're here to provide a brief overview of the IPP Demonstration Sites project to describe some of what we accomplished years 1 and 2 and the work we are engaging in moving forward to years 3 and 4. I'm Cassie Martin, Demonstration Sites Project Director from the Herring Center for Inclusive Education at the University of Washington. Here with me today is Rena Marie Leon Guerrero, Inclusion Specialist, also from the University of Washington Herring Center, and Cassie Borges, our preschool lead for the Inclusionary Practices Professional Development Demonstration Sites project. In the fall of 2019, OSPI launched the Inclusionary Practices Professional Development Project. The Herring Center partnered with OSPI to coordinate and lead this part of the larger statewide project, creating model demonstration sites that highlight inclusionary practices across Washington state. The funding was extended for 2 more years, and while we are still working on the infrastructure of scheduling visits and continuous growth for our demonstration sites, we are also taking what we've learned from the first 2 years to extend our impact to implement inclusive systems and structures across our demonstration sites school districts in Washington state. The Demonstration Sites project was developed to provide educators from around Washington with the opportunity to observe inclusionary practices in action, meet with school teams, collect artifacts that aid in systems change, and learn about how to implement inclusionary practices in different school contexts. By the spring of 2021, we had identified 16 model demonstration sites pre-K through 12 across all 9 ESD regions that provide professional development to visiting schools. Our demonstration sites highlight the diversity in our state. They include urban schools and rural schools, and schools in some of our largest and smallest districts across Washington. In collaboration with the Herring Center Inclusion Specialists, demonstration sites host visiting schools to showcase high leverage inclusionary practices. By sharing these practices and opening their doors to teachers, administrators, families, and community members, it allows visitors to see best practices in action and apply them in their schools. At the same time, the demonstration sites themselves continue to grow their inclusive cultures and refine their practices that contribute to equitable learning for all students.
Our demonstration sites are spread out across our state and highlight a variety of inclusionary practices. For preschool, Hood Canal identifies social emotional learning as a highlight, while Robert Lintz in SELA focuses on culturally responsive pedagogy, MTSS, family and community partnerships, and more. McMicken Elementary in SeaTac showcases their co-teaching, co-planning, visible learning, strong PLCs, and data analysis protocols. Both in the North Shore School District, Kokanee Elementary has been highlighting their PBIS structures and flexible services, and Ruby Bridges Elementary has been highlighting their inclusive mission and vision, flexible services, and universal design for learning. We have Brennan K-8 on the Olympic Peninsula, a school of 80 students. Brennan highlights their differentiated instruction and family engagement. Chase Middle School in Spokane highlights co-teaching, co-planning, and inclusive master schedules. Evergreen High School in Clark County is another one of our exemplary sites that showcases co-planning and co-teaching and how these inclusionary practices have shifted and changed the culture of their school district. These are just a few examples of the inclusionary practices our current 16 demonstration sites have shared thus far as part of their larger ongoing school journey.
There are some founding principles that drive our model demonstration sites work. To start, in every school, there are things that are working well. In education, we have a tendency to examine the problems associated with our practices, instead of examining what's working well, why it's working well, and how we can use that information to make things better. This asset-based approach is a productive way for schools to leverage their strengths to become more inclusive. Also, inclusion is not a special education initiative or an initiative at all, but is a cultural shift in philosophy and practice. If we simply change the way we deliver special education services without considering the culture of the school or how all students engage in teaching and learning, we'll never make the changes we need to truly impact student learning. Through the course of our webinars and now in-person visits to our IPP demonstration sites, and by way of scheduling virtual visits, districts, schools, and communities learn more about what steps are taken to make these shifts to a more inclusive school. This can include instructional strategies, systems, and structures that allow for more inclusive learning communities, and what the impetus was in the first place for the schools making these changes. They can also learn how they engage stakeholders, how they are working with the larger district, and other strategic moves they made to facilitate lasting and sustainable change. What's exciting about the demonstration sites is they're in various stages of their journeys, and whether they're in year 1 or they're 6 years in, they all have plans for continuous improvement. They recognize that as new students enter their buildings, and as they collect more information about the best ways students learn, that their professional practices need to reflect that learning in responsive and meaningful ways. We have learned in the last couple of years that we are capable of radical change, and we need to approach inclusion in the same way. We know that students with disabilities are not making the progress they need to with our current structures and systems. We need to do better, and we need to get moving. At the Herring Center, we are also on our own paths of continuous improvement as we get feedback about what schools, districts, educators, administrators, and what they need. We're shifting and changing what we're doing to maximize our impact. We developed this project because we experienced the impact on visiting schools of seeing inclusionary practices in action, those feelings, the dynamics. It was such an effective way for visiting schools to get why this works so well. And we experienced the impact on our demonstration sites by hosting visiting schools. Going virtual, just like for districts across the state, has encouraged us to develop new innovations and engage in true reflective practice. And we've adapted and grown in response to what we've learned, in addition to experiencing many successes in terms of our reach. We've also learned that schools can implement inclusionary practices, but that does not necessarily mean a shift in the inclusive culture of their schools, which is why we're taking new steps in years 3 and 4 to really focus on inclusive culture and systemic change across districts.
What does inclusion mean to you? And what is your why? There are so many stories and experiences and events that shape why inclusion matters to each and every one of us. It might be our own personal stories, experiences, and relationships, or professional ones. We might be responding to what 80 years of research tells us about the benefits of inclusive schools, including the numerous benefits for all students when they are engaged in general education environments and content. What speaks to us most might be our beliefs about equity, social justice, or disability justice, or passion to ensure that we provide feelings of community and membership in our schools for everyone, and that this carries through the broader society. It also means acknowledging the layer of marginality that exists, and that these layers can create barriers in our organizational structures, reinforce institutional discrimination and fear. We know there are existing biases based on what people have experienced, including implicit bias that exists around the social construct of disability. Our Washington State demonstration sites are addressing inequities in education and are working to create more equitable learning environments. They are engaging with families and communities to change the present and future landscape in our schools. We all have a role to play in dismantling barriers and creating inclusive school cultures.
In partnership with OSPI, the statewide cadre has identified some statewide project priority focus areas for years 3 and 4 that include centering racial equity and intersectionality with disability, engaging families as decision makers and co-designers, including student voice and opportunities for self-advocacy across our general education system, and the inclusion of students with more significant disabilities in general education context and content. Our priorities for years 3 and 4 show a shift to focusing on systems change work and continuous growth for our demonstration sites and districts. As I mentioned earlier, we understand that identifying and highlighting inclusive practices isn't enough. How are we building a culture of belonging and dignity is what's most critical to create inclusive schools that are representative of each and every student who attends our Washington State schools. Rena Marie is going to show the impact of IPP demonstration sites in years 1 and 2 and discuss how these priorities will play out in years 3 and 4.
As part of the statewide project, we are also examining professional networks, collaborations, and learning communities among and between schools who visit our IPP demonstration sites. These professional networks provide us with another measurement to determine the reach of our demonstration sites across Washington State. For example, schools that adopt and implement what they learn from our demo sites in their own school's context. Additionally, we are using social network analysis to understand, monitor, and evaluate the implementation process of inclusionary practices in participating schools. Social network analysis is a well-validated methodology for investigating collaboration and intervention diffusion through graphical analysis. This methodology allows us to identify and connect demonstration sites within professional networks. For example, we are able to identify how schools are connected through school visits, shared materials, and communication. This data will help to provide information to schools across the state about what schools are hubs for specific inclusionary practices and/or how schools are responding to one another. We provide similar information in our by the numbers section on our website that provides helpful information about who we need to engage further. To provide a brief explanation of the data, we surveyed our demonstration sites in the fall of 2020 to collect baseline and then again in the spring of 2021. We asked the following question: with whom have you shared materials, resources, artifacts, or information about inclusionary practices? On the left, the visual representation of our baseline social network analysis showed that not many schools were entering this work with strong connections with other schools. On the right, by the spring of 2021, many connections had been established between demonstration sites as well as with schools outside of the project. In this data set, the blue circles highlight the school sites which were involved in the sharing of resources and materials, while the yellow circles indicate schools who were requesting or consuming materials. The number in the parentheses indicates the number of schools that voted for a particular school. The larger of the circles, the greater the amount of the votes the school received. The black text indicates schools that are participating demonstration sites, and the red indicates schools that are non-demonstration sites. Finally, the lines on the images show the connections. Thus, our professional network community analysis shows that even in the pandemic year of physical quarantining and virtual learning, an educational community can connect and collaborate in a way that connects inclusion and educator learning. We hope to see these professional networks continue to grow. The IPP demonstration site project aims to have a significant impact on inclusive practices across Washington State. This aligns to the state movement to focus on all students, including those with significant cognitive disabilities. We are also taking what we were learning to scale and build capacity within districts. The impact of the demo sites happens across various interconnecting professional learning networking. We've already shared professional networking to strengthen connections between sites. Please check out the demonstration sites webpage to learn more about our impact, building professional networks, sharing our stories, and tracking reach by the numbers. This information is important because it both informs professional learning we offer, but can also provide information to districts around the state about the efficacy of this kind of professional learning. We want to make sure that when school personnel or teams visit demonstration sites or hear their stories, that it continues to provide that transformational learning experience. We don't want people to say when they visit a demo site, I want to move to that school, but rather I want to do that at my school. As we continue to expand the impact across the state, as well as build capacity within districts, our goals for years 3 and 4 are: first, we will be ready to offer virtual and in-person opportunities to visiting schools to learn about our inclusionary practices. We will provide artifacts to visiting schools and tangible takeaways, and we'll share our own vision for next steps as part of our plans of continuous improvement. Second, we will provide tools for other schools to use and reinforce in order to grow their inclusionary practices, culture, and engage in systemic change. We will develop a plan that clearly outlines targets for growth, learning, and identify protocols for measuring that growth, and include in those plans targets for each and every student. Third, we will use what we are learning and doing around inclusionary practices and systems to support district systematic change. And fourth, we will demonstrate through decision-making, systems and plans on equity-based inclusive approach that includes all stakeholders.
These are other resources the UW Herring Center IPP Demo Sites project is creating or utilizing to support inclusive districts and schools. The inclusion framework is a flexible tool to utilize within your own school teams across the district and with colleagues from across the state. The framework highlights 3 critical elements of inclusive education: relationships, equity, and instruction. There's a rubric component to help start to think about where your own school or district is in terms of these practices. In addition, there are critical reflection questions to guide towards those deeper conversations. This tool and critical reflection can inform your continuous plans for improvement, and sharing this within your professional networks can help to build a coalition of inclusive schools. The Inclusion Principles and Practices tool guides teams to identify inclusionary principles and practices that are in place in your school or that your school is progressing towards. There are 7 sections. There's a scoring rubric to help identify what is in place, in progress, or not in place, as well as fast track items that have been identified as high leverage and high priority in the inclusive journey to potentially target where to start or go next. This tool can be used for ongoing reference as you work through your plan for creating and sustaining an inclusive school. The Comprehensive Inclusive Education, General Education, and the IEP is a planning process guide based on a vision and expectation that each student can actively participate, belong, contribute, and learn in the school and larger community. The planning process is designed to develop an inclusive IEP that consists of 4 parts: a collaborative conversation, discussion of considerations to create an inclusive IEP, development of the education day at a glance, and ongoing education and supports. School communities that support the belonging, active participation, contribution, and learning of each and every student enhance a sense of community. The example of job-embedded inclusion PD is a slide deck created with the collaboration of the Tice Center, Herring Center, and demonstration site Mark Twain Elementary in Lake Washington School District. This presentation is an example of professional development that presents information about inclusion and gives supports and examples to help answer the question, what is inclusive education? In partnering with OSPI, the Herring Center IPP demo sites align with and help to support early childhood special education initiatives. OSPI has developed these initiatives to prioritize the intersectionality of social emotional development and embedded inclusionary practices in early childhood programs. OSPI's Special Education Division has funded these initiatives to increase positive outcomes for young children with disabilities, with coordinated intensive technical assistance, professional development, and systems level coaching for early childhood staff and integrated early learning environments. Please check out the IPP Demo Sites website. There's a wealth of resources and artifacts that can help you on your journey to inclusion, and includes audio stories, webinars to introduce our demo sites, webinars to take a deeper look at specific inclusionary practices, tip sheets with case studies, and so much more. You will find a short video that gives a tutorial for accessing these resources and artifacts. Thank you for your time. We hope you've enjoyed hearing about our work thus far, and that you now have access to more resources that can help you on your journey to inclusion. To learn more about the Demonstration Sites Project and OSPI's Inclusionary Practices Professional Development Project, or to view any of our webinar recordings, PowerPoints, artifacts, please visit these websites.